Hello, everyone. I'm Nick Powills, publisher of 1851franchise.com. We're doing yet another discussion today on why now is the time for landlords to partner with IWG. I'm going to bring Wayne and Ryan into our conversation. Very much looking forward to where we go from here. Just real quick so that our audience knows, anybody that's watching in real time or is watching in the future, Wayne, give us your quick background story. Ryan will do you next, just so that you're positioning who you are and what you do with IWG.
Thanks, Nick, and welcome everyone. Great to be on back together on this webinar. My name is Wayne Berger. I'm the CEO of the Americas with IWG, International Workplace Group. We are the largest provider of flexible workspace and co-working locations around the world, 3,600 locations and growing, over 1,500 locations here in North America. Been with the organization for 9 years, and frankly, we just closed out 2022 with our best growth year on record here, having signed over 500 locations globally, most of those being with partnerships with landlords. So looking forward to today.
Great. Thanks, Wayne. Ryan?
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Nick, for having us. I appreciate it. And a little back history with me. So I've been with IWG now for about 6 years. I originally started with the company as an area sales manager. So my job was to more so fill the space. And then I've transitioned to this regional director role, which is the role I'm in currently. And now, obviously, my job is to partner with owners of buildings and kind of show them the growth that we're taking forward and moving along.
Great. Wayne, to our audience, which is going to be, the bulk of them are going to be building owners, commercial real estate professionals, landlords in some sort of capacity. Could be some non-traditional folks like a hotel owner who is watching this. Give us the state of the union on the business currently and talk a little bit about what happened in the last 12 months that was a ginormous shift for where things are going.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. A few things. What I'll do is maybe to take a step back and talk about what's taking place just within the state of work and workplace. So as we spoke last year when we got together, we talked about how structurally people and companies were working and frankly living differently here during our post-pandemic resurgence. And what we've seen so far is this complete structural shift with how companies are looking at real estate and how people are working continues to accelerate. I'll show you a couple of stats. One, what we're seeing right now is 90% of workers are not just looking to work in a more flexible way, which means, by the way, accessing workspace beyond just a traditional corporate headquarters, something that's closer to home, closer to their clients, closer to what makes sense for them that day or throughout the day. 90% of workers in North America are choosing to work this way in a more flexible way. 88% of companies are supporting their workers, because by no means is this any longer this notion of attracting, retaining top talent. It actually is more so about the overall employee base. And I'll give you a good example. 20 years ago, the best employees, the most talented, the most sought after employees were given a cell phone as like a primary, as a primary tool to attract and retain them. If you look at it, the BlackBerry was the most sought after technology benefit 20 years ago. Today, frankly, every worker, let alone knowledge-based workers, of which there are 1.5 billion in the world, all have a mobile device. Most are provided by their company, and it's a primary tool for doing business. So you think about how technology shifts. Technology's become this remarkable enabler in helping companies start to look at rationalizing their real estate portfolio, because frankly, teams are very disparate geographically now, and people want to eliminate their commute. So this shift that we saw post-pandemic is only continuing to greatly accelerate. And I believe we are in the most structurally focused shift in the commercial real estate landscape in history. To give you an idea, our stats are showcasing in which we anticipate, and many analysts anticipate, that 30 to 40% of a company's real estate portfolio will be flexible by 2030. And 17% of that real estate portfolio will be flexible by 2024. So within the next 12 months, as we start to move from 2023 to 2024. Now, what has that been doing? Well, it's done a few things. One, vacancy rates are increasing dramatically around the world, and certainly here in North America. To give you an idea, vacancy rates, not taking shadow vacancy into consideration, and what shadow vacancy is for all of our listeners, is vacancy that is currently, it's space that's currently under lease, but is being unutilized or underutilized. These are organizations that have a lease tail for the next maybe year or 5 years that was signed prior to the pandemic, but most of their employees are now working remotely or in a flexible way, and the space is going underutilized, sometimes just completely empty. We've seen this continue to grow, shadow vacancies growing across major urban markets. Vacancy rates, posted vacancy rates have increased. They've doubled in Canada versus pre-pandemic, and they've gone up close to 65% in the US. And obviously, depending on city, those numbers vary. But we're seeing in the traditional downtown business cores, financial districts, vacancy rates are accelerating fast. Suburbs are a little bit more insulated, which is good news. But what this is doing is it's really moving not just companies to look at their capital investment and really look at moving away from traditional leases. It's really encouraging building owners, whether it's an institutional developer or an individual building owner who owns one or a small portfolio of buildings, to look at space differently and to consider flexible workspace as a core amenity for their building and their portfolio, and also look at flexible workspace as a very important solution that drives operating income into their building from day one, gives them a solution that drives revenue ongoing as it matures, and also, frankly, gives them a long-standing solution that can very well exceed a traditional the income derived from traditional leases over time. If we look at our business today, we've operated for close to 35 years, and we've operated because we take space and we monetize space, and we're the best at driving income and driving a return over and above traditional cost levels. So what we're seeing from building owners is they're not just interested in converting this vacant space that is growing in all major markets and in converting that to flexible workspace. They're actually doing it. So last year, we saw 500 partners around the world. These are building owners who own 1 to 20 to sometimes hundreds, if not thousands of buildings, take a percentage of their portfolio, sometimes within the building they own, and take that space, 10,000, 15,000, 20, 30,000 square feet, and partner with IWG, invest capital to convert that space into a great productive Regus location or Spaces location or HQ location, and start earning income from day one. And that space that frankly may sit empty for years to come. So suddenly there's a real dramatic shift in what's happening structurally in the industry, how companies are looking at where they deploy their workforce and what workplace looks like every day. And then in turn, savvy owners, savvy investors, savvy building and portfolio owners looking at how they start to convert space into a high value amenity that drives immediate return on income and long-term returns on their net asset value. So the shift is happening.
Ryan, Wayne and I have had discussions about this. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer. Like the intro into a landlord seems like if they can listen to what Wayne just said, then why would you not do this? When you're getting on the phone with someone, talk about how those conversations are going. Does the industry understand some of these ginormous shifts that are happening in the way that people work? Or are you having to educate them on here's what's coming?
I think a little bit of both, right? So you see it from both sides of the spectrum. One owner, 100%, they understand that this is the change. It's coming. It's happening, right? And Wayne touched on it since COVID, right? So I worked through COVID, right? I worked in this role through COVID as an area sales manager. So I saw a lot of the transition happening back then. Now, when it started, what I'll tell you is from then to now, it just more so accelerated, right? So it's kind of that post-COVID acceleration. I think owners are starting to understand that, and they're starting to see that. I mean, a great example of one owner that I'm working with is 6 months ago, we talked and it was, no, I'm going to see what I can do with this space. They reached back out to me and we're now having a conversation saying, hey, this is the change. You're right. We definitely are interested in this. We want to reopen our conversation. And now can you take the full floor instead of half the floor, right? So they're starting to understand it. They're starting to see the transition. It's really both sides of the spectrum. You're seeing it, but I'd say more, probably 75% of people are understanding that conventional leasing is changing.
Wayne, does COVID accelerate these discussions? I mean, what I'm hearing from Ryan is he's got a candidate who's going to sit on the sidelines. What can I do with this space? Ends up at the finish line saying, I guess I don't have the answer. Did COVID accelerate this? And are they getting to the conclusion faster that the way that you look at your office building 10 years ago is not the way that you're going to look at it 10 years from now?
It's interesting. I think COVID accelerated it, but the themes post-COVID are shifting. So many of our building owners, one of their initial thoughts post-COVID, when it came to how they're going to deploy their portfolio, was actually usually around what they were going to do structurally within their building. So, for example, if you remember post-COVID, there was a lot of conversation around how do we make sure our air systems are clean? How do we make sure we accommodate for safety? How do we make sure we ensure that we're tracking and measuring and providing the best, safest, cleanest environment? Now, certainly that's still an absolute critical requirement, but the conversation's completely shifted. So I think many building owners, and also just frankly, many business leaders, thought that what, where, when, and how people wanted to work, they felt that was an immediate impact point post-COVID, and it was going to take some time for people to transition out of their house, where if your job could support you working from home for 2 years, you did, right? Because it was such a big requirement, it was so explicit, it was so urgent. So if you had a job of which working from home was possible to be able to achieve your result, you were able to. And I think many building owners thought, this will just take time. We're going to go back to how people worked and go back to where people worked prior to the pandemic. This will happen as things start to settle and stabilize. But what's interesting is it's actually furthest from the truth. So what people have discovered is, one, the commute is the number one impact. People find aimlessly traveling to an office 5 days a week, 8:30 to 5, regardless of what they actually need to accomplish that day, is a waste of time and a waste of money. If you look at what's taken place within inflation, if you look what's going on with this pending recession, if you just look at what's taken place in terms of how people really value their time, both at work but also outside of work, it shifted how, when, and where people want to choose to work. And what we discovered is progressive companies and workers are turning to their organizations, and they want to establish a new way of working, which is providing more flexibility. So building owners, and I think the real estate industry, felt that it's only a matter of time that people will all come back. But what we failed to remember is, prior to the pandemic, over 50% of the global workforce actually worked from somewhere other than a traditional corporate headquarters for at least 1 day a week. And now what's happening is companies are looking at their real estate portfolio. They're measuring in a very pragmatic way what space needs to look like moving forward. And frankly, How often do they need to be able to bring people together? And Workspace is becoming more deliberately associated with the types of jobs that people do and what is required of them that day. And I think this is a very powerful element, because as we transition, we transitioned from the pandemic, and now we're at this stage of hyperinflation and cost and all these other elements that create barriers to, frankly, traveling into an office every single day. Once we transition that out of that period, the single biggest theme that is going to underpin organizations' decisions on what workspace looks like, and frankly, how much they sign under a conventional lease, is going to be based on three critical factors. One, how they attract and retain employees and what employees look like, because companies are more focused on becoming a global talent organization versus a local talent organization. What I mean by that is most companies, most owners, most managers today, the complexion of their organization has expanded. If you're a company based in Atlanta, by no means are you at a point any longer in which your talent pool will only come from Atlanta, right? You're now posting and hiring people out of city, out of state, sometimes out of country. All depends on what's required. And company teams now are more geographically mixed than ever before. And that's incredibly powerful, because it democratizes a team, an organization. It helps companies, frankly, attract the best talent based on what's required of the role and of their organization. The other big theme that's taken place is the environment. This will be the most critical theme over the next 10 years once we can transition past this period that's very obviously explicit and urgent, which is inflation and recession. But as we transition on, the reality is the environment is the most critical theme that we have to focus on as people, as organizations, as government. One of the single biggest ways to help support our reduction of CO2 emissions and achieve our CO2 eradication goals within cities and countries is, frankly, managing and eliminating a commute. And it doesn't mean that people do not want or need to be together. But what's happening now is people are gathering, organizations are bringing the people together when it makes sense and when it's needed. And it doesn't need to be every single day. So when you start taking a look at the themes, which is companies expanding their talent pools, companies becoming more geographically disparate, focusing on the environment. And then the last piece is companies are dynamic, right? So a traditional lease is at best 10 years, maybe 5 years on a sublease, sometimes 15 years. A company looks differently within 3 years, let alone 10 years. So it's very challenging for an organization to try to understand how much workspace they need, knowing that their business is shifting in such a vibrant way, whether it's into new markets, whether it's new roles, whether it's new opportunities, all those pieces are shifting. The last critical piece that is driving this is, frankly, technology. It's such a key enabler. If you look at what we're doing today, we are gathered, hundreds of us on this call together to talk about the future of work and how it's going to overlay into place, right? It's such a powerful enabler where we can accomplish an incredible number of business tasks and cultural tasks together within organizations or across organizations. It helps ensure that when we need to use physical space, it is a high value requirement, because we're able to accomplish so many other tasks together utilizing technology that, by the way, is still rudimentary, because where technology will be 3 to 5 years from now is dramatically accelerated from what we're doing today. So those are a number of the themes that we're seeing. So this complete shift in space as an investor is something to pay attention to, because the reality is people will still need space. Only 11% of workers want to work from home. This is a misnomer that we need to make sure we're educating everybody on, because there's this idea that it's either flex or in an office, or in an office, I mean a corporate headquarters. It can't be further from the truth. Corporate headquarters is important. It's going to look different, and it frankly may not need to be as big. And home plays a role as well. But what 80% of people, what they're looking for is the ability to leave their residence and travel 5 to 15 minutes. And by the way, that's walk, bike, or maybe a short commute to a workspace that is productive, that is well designed, that gives them the ability to socially interact, that gives them the ability to connect with their teams or other people via live or technological engagement, gives them the security in IT and infrastructure that they and their company needs. That's what people are looking for, right? Overall. And how you accomplish that is frankly taking your space and converting that to great flexible workspace, because the reality is companies and people want to access that via an app, right? That's the key piece. It's about technology and convenience. It's platform. And we've seen it in other industries. When you think about hotels, vacations, transit, you think about organizations like Airbnb, Uber, Lyft, Bonvoy, Booking.com, Expedia, what do they all do? They provide a platform that aggregates and provides convenience and accessibility to space. This is where we're moving to. It's a great opportunity for building owners to invest and provide the space that companies and people want.
Tons to unpack from that. But Ryan, I follow-up question to what Wayne just said. And I do think what you just said about the hotelers, like the reality is hotels have been co-sleeping. We're sleeping in a building together with people that we don't know, but we need a place to sleep. And so they've been doing that. They figured this out years ago, and you guys have figured it out as a business years ago, but it's now being accelerated into the workplace. Ryan, if you take us through like the last, say, 24 months, take us through what are these conversations with the prospects, the candidates, the building owners? How is it transforming and aligning with what Wayne is saying on the future of where things are going?
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty much spot on, right? So as you talk to more and more owners, you hear more and more stories, right? So you start to understand the different angles and different directions that these owners see and deal with every single day. So, you may have one owner that they've struggled to fill their space for the last 4 or 5 years. You may have one owner that now they just had 24,000 square feet of space come available, right? So touching on your hotel comment, right? So an interesting piece that we can kind of take away is too, with what we're doing and what we're able to offer is we can now offer that in any type of building too. It's not just your standard office space, right? So think of it as, I'm not just going into an office, right? You may have a retail building. You may have a hotel where you have flexible space in it. You may have a transport hub, apartment complexes, right? So not only are office building owners seeing this, but other owners are seeing it, right? I've had conversations with owners of these brand new apartment complex buildings where the lower level, you have retail space, right? In that retail space, they're saying, this is a great concept where, they're struggling to fill it because they don't quite have the demand they expected, but they love this concept. So you really see it from all sides of the spectrum on who you talk to and what they've seen over the past, like you said, 24 months or even 3 to 5 years. We're starting to see more and more people understand that. And I know Wayne touched on it a little bit too, in the conventional side of things, right? A lot of these clients that are bigger, they're not looking to do long-term commitments anymore. They're not looking at that 10-year commitment. So when we're coming in saying, hey, we're looking to be with you, we're not opening locations to close locations, right? So we're opening locations to help your clients and help our clients have more opportunity, more availability, more options. A great example I can tell you about is in the past, 24 months in Madison, Wisconsin, I had a client that they sold their entire building and they shifted into our Spaces location there, and they took our 3 biggest offices. So it's a perfect example of what we're seeing the future come to, right? They understand that I don't have to pay this huge building fee essentially, right, of owning this. We can save so much money by having the flexibility. They can add offices when they please. They can move offices. They can move locations. They have that flexibility built in with us. And I think not only are owners starting to see it, but companies are seeing it as well.
Wayne, I think about proximity, and obviously that solves some of the issues that you're talking about. The environmental side of this, if there's less time in the car is not running, it's not hurting our environment. So I think about our office space in Chicago, traditional signature building, big floor. And the equivalent in my mind is two sides. One would be if I was mandated that I could only eat at this pizza place, one pizza place, that's the only place I'm able to get my meals because we got to work. And so the workforce was forced to say, you only come to this box. This is the only box you can come to. And by the way, which could also play into some of the future of work, you can only work during these hours, and around noon, you're able to go take 1 hour, and then you're going to have to work to the end. And there's so much constraint. And we cross-applied that to how humans eat and said, you're only allowed one restaurant, and here's when you eat and nowhere else. People would say, no way. And so it's taken a while for the workplace to get there. On proximity, like you're forced to travel to the place where the company has located. But the reality is, if the real estate portfolio was, yes, I have an office in Chicago, but yes, I also have an office in Atlanta, and yes, I have one in New York, and yes, I have one in Denver. It's all the same cost and probably somewhat cost savings, but it allows the end user, your staff, to be able to go into a place with flexibility and work a little bit on their terms. It seems like there's so much that the workplace needs to catch up on that for whatever reason, we've held this as the standard. There are companies like Chase Bank that is saying everybody back in the office, which is probably going to leave a disruptible moment for another bank to come in and say, we don't work that way. But how far, like in this journey, how far along are we? Are we at like 1%? Or are we at like 90%?
Well, so what excites me is we are literally living in a time right now in what I believe will be the largest structural shift to how, when, where, and what people call work. But it feels messy because we're right in the middle of it. Like to your point, Nick, and I always remember this Bill Gates quote that I think I've been referencing for 15 years, and it still holds true. Bill Gates once said, it was like back in 1996, that as a human race, we always over-exaggerate the impact of change within 1 to 2 years. And we always underestimate the impact of change over 10 years. It's exactly what we're living right now. So I'll give you a couple of points. The point you mentioned earlier is exactly the case. If you think about it, we've worked the same way since the Industrial Revolution. There was a time where our economy was manufacturing, agricultural, distribution-based, all those elements, right? In which you required to go to a physical location to conduct your job, to achieve your result. And it was really required that you as a team of people, we're there. We're right there at that place. We've shifted. Those are obviously critical. Those are critical economies and industries in our overall economy for sure. But if you look at it today, as I mentioned earlier, we have 1.5 billion knowledge-based workers, and I'll use Ford around the world. And I'll use Ford as a good example. Ford has undergone a shift in the workplace strategy in which those individuals who have the ability to work in a flexible way now are granted that opportunity to work flexibly throughout the week, to make sure that where they choose to work drives the best level of result. It still means they get together as a team when required. It means they have head down work, they can work independently. And if Ford as a workforce, 250,000 people strong, if you look at their workforce, there are jobs that require them to still be together in a physical environment. You have 86,000 positions that are knowledge-based positions or administrative positions at Ford. That gives Ford the opportunity to be able to look at their business differently, look at their workplace strategy differently. And it's an interesting example with Chase. I love reading between the headlines. I love when these headlines come out, because right now, how often has commercial real estate been so salacious? It's salacious today. So a leader posts a headline that states that everybody's required to be back in the office. The Canadian federal government just did this. Monday was the first day that all federal government workers were supposed to be back in the office, the largest employer in Canada. Chase does the same thing. JP Morgan does the same thing. We saw Twitter do the same thing, right? With Elon Musk and Tesla and Twitter. But the reality is, when you actually read the article, they're still promoting hybrid. What they're saying is they're at a stage of shifting. So each of those companies have stated that they want their employees back in 3 to 4 days a week, all depending on the level of progression that the leadership holds today. If you just look at that number, let's just stay at the conservative level. Companies will ask their employees to come back to a company office 4 days a week. That's still 20% of the time spent elsewhere. Today, flexible workspace represents less than 5% of the commercial real estate portfolio in North America. Just to be able to support the workplace needs of those individuals who are in the most conservative flexible workspace strategy is still an incredible level of investment. And I do believe that right now, we're just working through what the future of work and workplace will look like. It's a step in the process, because the reality is what we don't have in front of us right now is a real urgent need to have to shift fundamentally. It's going to take time, and I can promise you there's two things that are happening. One, many leaders who are in charge of the organizations today grew up in a time and an era where they were in an office every single day. So it's almost a romantic element that you need to be in an office in order to drive results and drive culture. The reality is it's not true, right? And what will continue to happen is this is going to shift. In the next 7 years, 75% of the workforce will be millennials and Gen Zs, the first generations that have never lived in an analog world. That's a brilliant thing. The reason why is because place will not be a static consideration. Place will be important. Workspace will be important, but we will leverage workspace very differently, right? Because it won't necessarily be about having that conventional lease signed over 10 years. The other piece I'll add into it is this is continuing to shift based on leases. So lease tails. So what's interesting in the United States is the highest percentage of leases that are 10 years or longer come up for renewal or termination in 2024 and 2025. This will be a time, there's a significant financial impact for an organization. This will be a time when companies and leaders will take a look and say, okay, what is our go forward workplace strategy? Because our teams are saying we can work incredibly well by having some flexibility throughout the week. Our costs from a capital perspective are very, very high when it comes to signing leases and investing the millions of dollars it requires to build and construct and furnish and manage and maintain space. Space is becoming redundant, and technology continues to improve, and our teams are shifting because we're mixed in terms of our teams. Some are local physically, and some live in different places, and we bring them together. And what's interesting, I just take a look at what we're doing every single day at IWG. I manage a brilliant team. The team we have in place is powerful. It's aligned. It's culturally positive. We have a great culture. We have a great mission. Everybody understands what to accomplish. And yet we actually all work in a very flexible way. Very rarely are we actually together live. And I'll give you one more example, and it relates to business travel. So in 2021, the economists predicted that 50% of business travel was gone for good. And what's interesting is it's actually happening. Business travel is following the same types of themes as workplace is following. So what we're seeing today is the day-to-day travel that used to take place between a company and a client is starting to shift. We're seeing less business travel on the domestic side, traveling to see a client live versus the ability to be able to engage utilizing technology. But we're seeing an increase in destination travel. And I lived it a month ago when we had one of our conferences here in North America. At the conference facility we were at, it was amazing to see the number of companies that were bringing their people together. Highly purposeful, big investment, opportunity to talk about the mission for the next year, celebrate successes, look at where to improve. Highly purposeful, very focused, good investment away from just traditional travel. It's happening with Workplace. It doesn't make sense for people to travel in every single day. People are not looking to do so. Companies are rationalizing their real estate portfolio. They bring people in to a destination, to an office, whether it's co-working location or a corporate headquarters when the need's there. So these trends are really continuing to shift. And I think right now we're just in the eye of the storm. We're in the middle of a messy conversion, battling headlines, battling what we think are values, but really it's a structural shift to changing how people define work and how companies and frankly cities manage workplace.
Ryan, I think about this battle, and I like using analogies. The easiest analogy I can make is when jets first started, the questions that come up, I sit down on my seat, and first of all, I got to find my seat on a plane. I'm going to walk past this control thing that's going to fly me from A to Z, and then when I sit down, you get a little one of these. You're like, "Ooh, what is that?" And it feels really uncomfortable. What is the equivalent of the questions on this battle? What is the equivalent of the questions that some of the landlords are asking you that they need to be comfortable with because they're going through this? They feel turbulence that they haven't felt before, and it's safe, but they're perceiving it in a different way. What questions are being asked?
Yeah, I mean that's a great question, right? There's quite a few I'd say that you get consistently, and I think one would probably be, why my location, right? I think that's a really common one we get, and a lot of that's on us to be able to answer that, right? So in my position, it's having knowledge of your territory, understanding why you need a location in that area, right? It's there's a demand there. There's a gap that we need to fill in, right? It may be between Milwaukee and Madison. We have nothing there, right? It's just a simple example like that, where understanding your territory and being able to talk to an owner and explain why their location is a great fit for us, not only with what we're doing. I mean, Wayne's covered enough of that to say this is the future, right? So they understand that a lot of times. It's just them understanding, well, why us? And it's an easy conversation when you talk to it, because you can look at their building and say, well, it's been vacant for 3 years, right? You're struggling conventionally to lease it out. We have demand in this market. There's a need there. Have a plan in place on our end, and we do. We have plans in place and have all our territories and understand the needs and demands that we have. So I think that's probably one of the biggest ones. And a lot of them really just want to understand the step-by-step process, I think, right? So walk me through from day one to time we open, right? They want to understand what that looks like for them. You know, with the conventional lease, they're looking at it saying, well, this could take up to 6 months to complete, and then we have to do the build out. It may be 8 to 12 months before they get anyone even in their space. Now, one thing that always shocks the owners when we're talking to them is how quick we can do it, right? This is the speed to close and open the location. And I think that's where we've done it long enough now. We're the experts in this. We understand how to do it, how to maximize it, and how to get you up and running and basically hit the ground running, right? So I think really getting them an understanding of beginning to end is really important too. And a lot of them, that's a big concern for them, is to really understand that. So I'd say those are two very common questions I get. And then obviously, they want to know what happens after the signed agreement, right? So what happens when we get an agreement in place? And we have a team that's their job, is to get the organization operations, the build out, to help them, guide them through that. And we have all those teams to do that. And that's really where, again, we're the experts in this. So we guide them along the way.
Wayne, I want to transition to two comments that have been put in the webinar discussion, just so that we're addressing these. One question is IWG building out space differently today versus pre-pandemic?
It's a really good question. So I'll start with co-working in general is building out different space. And the reason why I say that is because the needs and trends of workers and companies look different. So are we designing and building differently? Yeah, I think we are in a couple of ways. One, we've always done a really good job monetizing space. I mean, we've been doing it for 33 years, so we've kind of learned through all the mistakes. We've built some locations, especially right prior to the pandemic, that had a large number of team rooms, a lot of open space, a lot of open co-working space for people to gather and congregate. We've really started to shift that back a bit and have a smaller office portfolio footprint, because we've seen a very high demand of space for smaller teams and individuals as well. We've also, I think, outside of the design of the space, we've also invested more into technology, because what we're seeing today, it's really interesting. The demand is coming in where we're seeing companies still want larger space to replace their corporate headquarters. Frankly, this has been a big shift. But also, we've seen more and more companies ask us for access to our locations across 20 to 30 cities. Whereas it used to be, hey, I'm in Palo Alto, I need more space here in Oakland or Palo Alto. Now it's, I have people I'm hiring in London, in Miami, in Toronto, in Halifax, Nova Scotia. I need space for them to work, right? And this is one of the big shifts we've seen is this demand for more and more locations to support their growing teams. So a few things we've done on that point is, one, it's shifted both space design, but also where we would place space. So for example, we've been opening up really strong, successful IWG locations in shopping malls, right? So we've seen this not just in the United States, but in South America and Latin America, Central America as well. We've been opening up to Ryan's point, in transit hubs, because it's close to where people want to be. It's when they're on the move. And then we've just been dramatically accelerating locations within new cities as well. There used to be a point where we worked on a hub and spoke strategy, where we would grow quite exponentially in the downtown central business, the financial districts of cities, Manhattan, San Francisco, Toronto, LA has been growing, Chicago, and then from there spoke across the neighborhoods, the metro lines, and then suburbs. Well, now what's happening is we are seeing extraordinary demand in places like Champaign, Illinois, Wiley, Texas, Duncanville. I've learned about more cities across our country than I ever even seen before, frankly, because of demand, both from partners as well as clients. So that's been one of the biggest changes, is less design. Like, we continue to design space where every location has 7 to 8 different work environments. So that way, when our clients are there, they're able to spend their day working, but in different environments, depending on what's required of them. Are we adding some smaller space on occasion? Yeah, for sure, because large team space isn't as prevalent as it was prior to the pandemic. But the biggest shift has been adding, frankly, the need for more locations and making a significant investment in technology. So that way, companies are able to give their employees immediate understanding on where to go for space, right? So it's investing in the app, investing in the platform, investing in technology in which when a member or a client shows up at a location, they can immediately access it via digital technology and not have to worry about going through different steps. That's been a major change.
Another question says, also, you mentioned transit, demand for good workspace within a short commute, and that people don't want to be isolated at home. But what are the key amenities being required by today's knowledge worker?
You know, it's funny. I'd say ping pong tables. No, I'm just kidding. It's really interesting. There's always this idea of amenities, undoubtedly. But what's interesting is the single biggest amenity that people are looking for is, frankly, really good workspace close to their house. That is absolutely the number one amenity. Like, they want the ability to walk out of their condo, their house, whatever it is, and walk, bike, or short commute 5 to 15 minutes. That's the number one amenity. Now, once you get into the amenities, once you get into the space, what are they looking for? They want access to different types of space. They want a private office where they can make their calls or get head down work completed without being interrupted. They want to kick off their day walking to something that's really nice, right? Which is, a nice club experience where they can, grab a spot in some soft seating or a booth and have a coffee or a cappuccino and be able to have that start of their day when they start working through things. The other big amenity that, frankly, we're starting to see, but I think you're going to see more so, is shifting away from this idea of just space amenities. Like, it's not about kombucha or different items on tap or, different types of social events. Listen, social events important for sure. But what people are looking for now is to say, look, what's my work experience? So we're actually evolving, not just where we offer space, but we also provide a company and, in turn, their workers all the benefits they need. So whether it's a fitness or a gym membership, right through to different types of work-life benefits, different types of access to programs, different events that they can access within the IWG location or in surrounding areas. It's actually now becoming more, what we're trying to promote is something that's more holistic for a company's workforce, because companies are becoming more geographically disparate, right? They need more support in ensuring that their workers have everything they need, right from a really well-designed kickoff package that when they join their company, they get a beautiful kickoff package of items and amenities to start their career effectively, because sometimes their induction is managed virtually, right? It's happening, right? Right through to having access to space and also have all the health and wellness benefits that they need, because the reality is a healthy person creates an engaged, powerful, productive employee. What I love is health and wellness is now the number one benefit that people are looking for when they either decide to join a company or stay with a company. It's now superseding pay and bonus and title as the core benefit. So the reason why I bring it up is it's something that can't be ignored. So those are the key pieces. But I would go back down, honestly, Nick, to the point where if I'm a business owner, if I'm a building owner or portfolio owner, I'm thinking about amenities. Frankly, it comes down to just well-designed, flexible workspace that workers can access within a 5 to 15 minutes.
One more question. COVID showed us you could work from home, may have invested in home office technology and equipment. How easy will it be to shift them out of home with an IWG office? Additionally, if COVID rears its head, what is the anticipated impact on the co-working concept?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think two things. One, I don't think there's a requirement to get anybody out of their house, because the reality is 11% of people actually want to work from home full time. Home, it's not about working from home, it's about flexibility. People have been able to demonstrate that being empowered to have choice in where they work will generate great results for an organization. People want to be treated like grown-ups. Workers want to be treated like adults. They understand that they are paid to achieve a goal and a result on behalf of the organization, whether, by the way, they own their own company or they work for an organization. They get it, right? For sure, we are shifting to a results-based society. What they want is the ability to really enjoy the benefits of what they learned and lived over those last few years and still achieve, if not exceed, the result. They want choice, and it's not about home. And what's interesting is very few companies have and are providing the necessary ergonomics, furnishings, and IT security to deploy people to work from home full time. It's an interesting element where if you take a look, if somebody has enough space in their dwelling in order to set up their home office and be able to have everything they need that meets their company security protocols, IT protocols, and then also just work comfortably and have separation of work and home, that's fantastic. But that's a fraction of the workforce, even here in North America, let alone the globe. Very few people. I do not have a home office in my home where I can separate. And people want separation. People need separation. Outside of the fact you underscore the need for important IT security protocols and a comfortable work environment. So getting people out of home is not challenging. Getting people to commute 45 to 60 minutes is and can be a death knell for an organization because it's unnecessary. People want the ability to work close to home. Now, what can happen to the industry if another pandemic hits? Look, undoubtedly, it was challenging in the industry because if you look at how many co-working operators are designed, much of their cost structure is based at times at conventional leases, and they monetize space. The reality is there's been so much evolution and advancement over the last 3 years in how flexible workspace is shifting, both from a financial perspective and a capital construct perspective. To me, it will only continue to grow if we run into the situation where another pandemic arises. The reality is it's shifting in its financial structure in terms of how co-working operators are managing their business and managing their overall capital costs. So that shift has really propelled an industry to become structured in a more dynamic, frankly, more capital lean way, right? It's become less capital intensive, which helps. And what's interesting, Nick, I'll have one last piece. The best operators in co-working and flexible workspace, the best operators you can see prior to the pandemic. But there are some that were brilliant at managing their business because of how they structure their business, how they monetize space, and how they drive performance and revenue into workspace, right? So that was happening prior to the pandemic. The pandemic did nothing more than exacerbate the best players and the best operators from the operators that were challenged prior.
Ryan, to the ghosts out there, the ghost prospects, the candidates that are looking at you but you don't know their name yet, what's the number one thing you want them to know about this opportunity?
I would say just understanding the IWG business model is probably the most important thing, and whether they have any knowledge of that or not, sometimes it's better when they have no knowledge, right? And then the reason I say that is we can properly educate them. We can teach them, who we are, what we do. We can create and develop an understanding of, our program and our company and what we can do to offer them and help them not only as an owner, but help their building kind of revitalize their building in a sense, right? So I think it's kind of one of those situations where it's great if they know stuff, but if they don't, it's not a bad thing because it's our job as the experts in this business to be able to properly educate them. So well, it's kind of a roundabout answer, but honestly, I think it's on us to really just properly educate them.
Wayne, the last question I want to tee up for you. 5% of commercial real estate is dedicated to co-working currently. it's not that you're saying to the landlords, building owners, go and convert your entire building into co-working. What you're saying is create an insurance policy for your building. You have this dead space already. If you were going to build it out for a new tenant, if you could even find them, you're going to give TI anyway. Like, use this as an opportunity to diversify the portfolio that's underneath your roof. Is that an accurate statement?
Exactly right. It's exactly the same as this polarizing idea of either working from home or working from an office. It's not the case. This is about diversification. If a building owner took 10% of their portfolio and converted that to flexible workspace, it provides them with a few things. One, diversification, to your point. Secondly, a new stream of potential tenants that they will not access today. Because the reality is, if we look at our business today, 85% of the Fortune 500 companies, they call IWG for their workspace needs. Right? They aren't going direct to a building owner, and they definitely do not have teams in place to search for property where they need to deploy their people. Right? So it's a new dedicated stream of prospective tenancy and income. Right? So diversification is key, even if it's 10, 15% of a portfolio or a building. We've been able to successfully launch a great IWG location, a Regis, a Spaces, an HQ, a Signature in 10,000 square feet, 8,000 square feet, 15,000 square feet. It's an opportunity to try a new model in an industry that is going through a seismic shift and drive operating income from day one. Right, which is a difference than traditional lease practices.
Wayne, one more question popped up, and I want to get to this before we close. I said we were going to close, but this one I think is important. He wrote, as a landlord in a town of approximately 50,000 population, what will be our competitive advantage regarding other co-working spaces in the area? Do we need to be concerned about oversaturation of the concept in the area? Is there a unique selling proposition of IWG that will provide an advantage to us?
Great question. So I think a couple of quick points. Simple answer is, one, we'd love to get with you direct, and let's get to know your city and also the current competitive landscape, because we'll provide for you, and frankly, just an unbiased perspective, because what we care about is that every single worker in that city has an opportunity to access great flexible workspace in general. So let's get with us. Second point, saturation, chances are we're not saturated in the market, because we've seen tremendous growth opportunity. If you take a look at that 5% to 30%, that is not relative to just a large market or a large company. That is taking place throughout North America. We're really shifting to a new economic approach, going back to that European town square concept, of which people want to access, they want to live, they want to work, and they want to access all their services and their amenities close by, right? So a town like 50,000 is actually a perfect place, because in many instances, cities of 50,000, many residences travel to the closest large city in order to work for a period of time. This gives those organizations and those workers access to great flexible workspace close to home. So I can promise overall, saturation point is not hit in those markets. Now, why turn to IWG? Well, a couple of reasons why, without bias. Number one, IWG accesses the largest collection of clients than anybody else. So for example, if you are Amazon.com and you need to place 30 developers in that city of 50,000 people, you're not going to take the time to try to understand who is in the market from an operator perspective, who the competition is, and where you can best place the person. What you're looking for is a turnkey solution. We see this because we work with 85% of the Fortune 500 companies, And because we have 10 million clients who use our space every single day, what we're hearing from them and what they demonstrate is they want ubiquity and convenience. They want to turn to IWG and they want to be able to place their people within, whether it's 3 hours to 24 hours. They know what to expect. They know what the services are. There's a master services agreement already in place. They want convenience, right? And they know that they can rely on us when it comes to meeting all of their needs. That's one of the single largest differentiators because our partners have a greater access to potential tenants than any other operator. Now, on top of that, we have our global supply chain elements that our global supply chain contracts, our global construct contracts, all those elements help drive economies of scale, keep their costs low when we're building a new location. And then, of course, we've been doing it for 33 years. There isn't a provider out there of any reasonable size, whether it's local, statewide, province-wide, or national, that has the level of experience that we do. The last piece I'll make mention is we currently operate the largest platform in the globe when it comes to real estate. And why does that make a difference for a building owner? Because today we receive 1.5 million inquiries every year from people, companies, workers who explicitly are looking for space. Prior to this call, we were on a call reviewing all the cities that we've received demand for, of which we don't have a location, but the demand continues to come in. That platform creates extraordinary demand. And that's a platform that we continue to invest in. Picture the Airbnb of commercial office space. It's what we build, what we've built, and what we operate today. That drives more eyes on space that is required, and that drives inquiries, demand that in turn fills locations. Our biggest reality is we need more locations in order to meet the demand.
Which is why we're having this conversation. I mean, obviously, like for people that are watching, if you need more information on this, you have resources, whether it's a Ryan or Ryan up to a Wayne. Like clearly the knowledge base is extremely strong in this community that you guys have built. Secondly, that knowledge base shows that you guys know what you're doing. I mean, like it's very clear whether you're the CEO or you're someone at all the way at the bottom, someone that's working the front desk. Like the knowledge base is super high, and it's a collective that's committed to the future of co-working and flex space. So like there's a lot here. Very engaged audience. Wayne and Ryan, thank you so much for this conversation. We will be having more of these to our audience. Make sure that you stay connected on the email list or reach out. We'll make sure we get you connected, or if there's follow-up questions that came out of this conversation. But that was another hour of discussion on IWG. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.